Hey y'all! Well, today we're going to be reviewing something that's a little outside of my expertise, but it's still something audio, and we all are into trying to get a really good streaming setup, and I've really struggled to find a streaming whole thing or even a CD player kind of setup that really just grabs me like vinyl does. Normally, this is what I'm listening to. Vinyl on my turntable, all that deal. Love it. Got a really nice moving coil cartridge setup with my tube phono stage and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, this digital stuff is, like I said, my expertise is in this stuff. This is normally what we're working on this channel is tube amps and tube audio and that sort of thing. Real analog kind of focused. And I've tried several different streaming devices. Started off with a Topping E30, and I still use that little box downstairs on my just kind of background music system that I hook up to my extra computer and play some YouTube on it when I'm down here working in the shop, which is where we're at today. And I'm not going to even attempt to do like a bunch of measuring and stuff on this device. I've got my audio analyzer suite. I got my old Tectonic scope that I use with my tube gear and all that stuff. And if you want to see like all the jitter and synads and all that stuff, Amir's already done his review of this DAC. You can go see it there. I'm just going to show you like what you get in the box, and then give you a kind of a little rundown of the menu, why I picked this DAC, and then what I think it sounds like. So, you get this really nice looking box in the mail. I got this from Amazon. It was not through Amazon. It came shipped direct from China. So there's that deal. At this point, I don't think it's being stocked in Amazon warehouses, so I don't know what the return process would be like if you don't like it. So I can't really comment on that because I haven't experienced it. So, hey, you know, figure that out before you buy it. I was pretty sure I wanted this DAC. From the few reviews that are out there, the way they described the sound of this really sounded like what I was looking for. So, let's look at what's inside this really nice black box that comes in. And then it's very well padded. It's got this nice thick piece of foam there. And I've already opened this up, so this is a fake unboxing, but comes with this standard topping remote. If you've ever owned topping devices before, it's the same remote that looks like all of them have. So nothing new there. And it sits in this little protective thing there. Got a Bluetooth antenna, which I haven't hooked up yet. Probably not going to use Bluetooth on it. Just, that's not why I bought it. Comes with some other cables. Like comes with a power cable. It comes with a USB cable. And for any other cables, you're on your own. So, here's what the little guy looks like. And coming from a E30, and then I also bought an E70 based off of like Amir's measurements, and over at Audio Science Review that he said, you know, this is one of the best performing DACs that we've ever tested. And so I was like, okay, let's grab one of those. Get rid of the cable out of our way. So this one didn't get his glowing review. He did say for a R2R ladder DAC that this is one of the best performing ones that he's tested, but he was still like, this is failed technology. I don't recommend, you know. I can't remember whether he gave it a headless panther. I don't think he did, but yeah, you know, he's got all his little panther deals. Anyway, what do I think? First thing I'll tell you about it is you need to let this thing burn in before you listen to it. And, you know, I know that like tube amps, they need some burn-in time. The caps need to burn in and all that stuff. I wasn't that sold that stuff like this needed burn-in time, but after my experience with this device, it definitely does. So before you even hook it up to an amp, hook like your streamer box up to it, or hook a CD player up to it, turn everything on, and just let this thing have music run through it for about 12 hours is what I did. And I'll tell you what I heard when I first hooked it up was, compared to the analog out on my Yamaha S300BL, I think it is, which is a pretty nice sounding CD DAC, this box hooked up to the coax sounded thin. The bass was really just not very dynamic, and it just sounded like, I don't know, it just sounded like it was almost struggling. And if I had just that experience to go on, I would have returned this or figured out how to return it. But I knew from past experience that sometimes, like Bono cartridges, like tube amps, other devices, you give them some run-in time, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to proclaim to know, but it definitely changed the sound of this. So after I ran music through this thing for about 12 hours, the next day, hooked it up, and it definitely sounds a lot better now than the analog out of my CD DAC. It's got more dynamic bass. It's got like bass punch that my CD DAC doesn't have. And the mid-range has a clarity and at the same time a richness that was missing on any of my other digital sources that I've listened to so far. And at the same time, it brings like a nice little sparkle to the top end, which that changes with some of the different settings. I found that I prefer the sound with no oversampling. And with the oversampling turned on, might work good if you got some speakers that don't have a particularly detailed top end. I've got some quad S2s that are they've become my go-to speaker. I just love the way those ribbon tweeters sound. And so I don't need that reinforcement on the detail on the top end, or the sparkle as I call it. So the no oversampling sounded better to me. Now I'll go over some of the menu stuff and some of the features this has. And one of the key things to know is this is Topping's first ladder DAC. And they are using what looks like to me the ladder DAC resistor board thing straight out of the Holo Audio's DAC. And they also make a DAC near the same price point. I think theirs is $1,200 and this one's $1,000. And I was kind of on the fence about which one to buy. And then when I started looking at the feature set of the Topping kind of implementation of that board, it provides oversampling if you want to, or you can turn that off. It's got this programmable EQ thing that I haven't messed with yet, but just my basic understanding is there's some kind of downloadable program that you can get off their website that you can create a file that you then upload to the box, and then it creates presets for EQ adjustments for, tuning your room. And again, I just listening to this thing as it is out of the box, I don't feel like it needs anything. I mean, it sounds great to me, but that's an option if you like tinkering with the EQ. And the Holo didn't have that option either. This one also has the option of using it as a straight DAC or as preamp. So if you've got an amp, like all of my amps have a volume control on them, I do have a pair of mono blocks that don't. And so it'd be nice to be able to hook this up to it, just straight into those, and can use this to control the gain or the input signal going into those to control the volume without having to have a preamp. So that's a nice thing. So let me go over. I've got the notes here, or the manual that came with it. I downloaded it and printed it. I'm old school enough. I like stuff printed. So you can change the themes, which is like the default colors. There's like this Aurora blue that it kind of comes as a default, which looks fine to me. The home screen, which is kind of an interesting choices. You've got like a normal one, which I'll go over what that is in the different modes. Then it's got I think kind of a cheesy looking view meter. I wish they hadn't made it with like this antique orange background. I wish they had just made it like a square view meter, like, most amps we see, instead of this round kind of old school. It just doesn't fit the digital nature of this box. An analog meter would be cool, but I wish it was just the shape of the screen, and it was full screen, and that maybe you could adjust the background colors, and you could, if you got some Macintosh stuff, you could match the Macintosh blue or whatever. It'd look better than trying to put a 1920s vintage kind of, orange round view meter. It just looks kind of cheesy to me. So obviously I'm not going to use that. It's also got a FFT display, which is more fitting for this type of gear, but I would rather have the information that's on the normal screen. You can also adjust the brightness from low, medium, high, and auto, and yeah, that's kind of self-explanatory. You can adjust the classic view meter to either +4 or +10 dB. So if you're going to use that meter, there you go. Maybe they'll do a firmware update and change that meter on the screen. That would be nice. I hope you're listening, Topping. So then you have an input select, which is either USB, which is the default, optical, coax, AES, BT, or 2S. And I'm going to be using the optical and the USB, and I'll get into that in a minute. The output selected, I'm using SE, which is the RCA only. I don't do XLR, especially with this tube gear. I think it's ridiculous to try to convert this single-ended tube geared XLR to run a cable 1 foot long. But I digress on that one. It's also got the on-off trigger stuff, which I guess if you've got a bunch of these digital boxes, you can have them trigger each other, so you only have to turn one on. It's also got a signal on, which is what it's set on right now. And it mostly comes on when there's a signal coming through it. It seems a little flaky, but I haven't used this thing enough on and off yet to see if, it is reliable, and I don't know. It seemed like I had a couple issues with it not turning on sometimes, but you can just hit the power button and it comes on, or on the remote. And you can disable that feature if you don't want to have the trigger. So then the next menu setting is that equalizer I told you about, the PEQ config, and you can set it to either enabled or disabled. And I've got it disabled right now because I don't need an EQ. But if you do, obviously you can turn it on, and then you've got EQ select, and it has up to 5 EQs that you can store in it. And it looks like it supports up to 192 kilohertz going through the EQ. So if you're one of those people that, like, I want to see way over 192 kilohertz files being played, won't work with the PEQ, it looks like to me. It also has a channel balance control, which is kind of nice. If you don't have any other way of doing a channel balance, like most of my amps don't have a channel balance knob on them, and most amps don't anymore, so you can balance left right with the DAC, which is kind of a neat feature. You can also set the maximum output level, which is nice because a lot of my tube gear likes a pretty hot signal going into it, and so you can set it to either 4 or 5 volts. That's nice. You can also set it to a preamp mode or like a straight up DAC mode. And the DAC mode, it's wide open all the time. And obviously with the preamp mode, the volume's adjustable. So you have that feature. So the next setting is you have oversampling. And you can set it to OS with OS is on. You can set no oversampling, which turns that off. So it's just the DAC itself that you're hearing and the file. There's no, trying to improve the dynamic range or changing the sound quality, any of that kind of stuff. It's straight up what comes off the ladder DAC, which to me has a more analog sound, which is kind of the sound that I'm shooting for. Listening to tube gear and that kind of stuff, it sounds more like my tube phono stage, analog vinyl deal does. The oversampling it just sounds artificially bright to me, like it's adding something that's not there. It's kind of like sharpening a digital picture. It's real easy to sharpen it too much. I mean, I could see maybe using a lower rate of oversampling. Now, they do have the ability to set the amount of oversampling. You can set it to 1x, 2x, 4x, 8x, or 16x. And then it's got best, which is some kind of algorithm that automatically selects the appropriate oversampling rate. Yeah. So then there's the different connections on DSD channels and 2S. That's not stuff that I'm going to be using. And then finally you have the Bluetooth on and off. I turn it off just because I'm not going to be using Bluetooth with this. And they have different Bluetooth settings. You can turn the remote on and off. I'm not sure why you'd ever turn the remote off, but might be a need for that for somebody. And then the button on the front here, you can change what it does, which is really nice. And you can have it as a power on switch. You can have it as a home select switch. You can have it as a brightness select. You can have this as like dim the screen. And what I did is input select, because I'm going to have a CD deck and a streamer box, and they're going to be connected on different inputs. And so I can hit this button and select the device that I want to run through this. And then they've got the two different USBs, the UAC 2.0 and UAC 1.0. You set the language, factory reset button. And that's kind of it going through the menu. I don't think, any of the other review videos I've seen gone through the menu. So you can see it's got a lot of cool features. One of the things I wanted to mention was, and again, I am not an expert at digital technology. I just listen to stuff when it comes into this realm. And I look at technical reviews from other people. I do understand that most folks say, like when you're hooking something like this Yamaha CD deck up to something like this external DAC, but you'd use a coax cable. A friend of mine that does a lot of streaming stuff, he said, but try both. One might sound better to you than the other. So I tried both, and to me, the optical cable sounds better than connecting over the coax. And it may not technically be as good, but sitting there A/B listening to it, it's less fatiguing, and it just seems to have more life to it with the optical cable than it does with the coax cable. So I'm going to be running the CD deck off the optical cable. Now on the other device that I'm feeding into this, I've got a Blue Sound Node X. I think it's the same one as the Blue Sound Node 2024. It's got the newest Sabre, chip in it. And honestly, I just never was crazy about how that thing sounded either. I mean, I know it was supposedly, I paid an extra like $500 to get this better DAC and a better headphone amp, and it's supposed to be just better technology. But I haven't used it very much because I wasn't crazy about the way it sounded. And for now, I've got it hooked up with the USB cable from it to this, and it sounds really good. Now, I do want to play around with the coax cable just to see if there's something different there. And, I don't know. Again, I'm not a technical expert, and if I was looking for technical perfection, I wouldn't be listening to a single-ended EL34 amp that's got almost no feedback and has 2% harmonic distortion. So I'm not, it's not technical perfection. I'm looking for a certain sound that is pleasing and relaxing to me. And so, but I don't want to use the optical because I know my CD DAC sounds better with the optical cable, and I don't want them sharing an input where I can't just switch them with this button on the front. So I want to try the USB versus the coax, see which one of those I like better for the streamer box, and go from there. So yeah, that's kind of the review of this thing. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, that was a crappy review. You didn't tell me a whole lot. Well, yeah, and you could have downloaded the manual and read all that stuff I just showed you. But I think it's a really nice analog sounding DAC. And for you folks that really like vinyl and like that sound, this might be your holy grail like I feel like it is for me. I'm really happy with the way this sounds, and I can see myself spending more time listening to my collection of CDs and use my Tidal streaming subscription way more than I have in the last year because it just hasn't gripped me like listening to my vinyl does. So anyway, that's going to be it for this review. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to see more about like DIY stuff, tube audio, I do kind of a range of stuff. I do some speaker reviews every now and then. So that kind of stuff, if you're into audio, please subscribe. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters and folks that support the channel in various ways. It helps me be able to go out and buy stuff like this. This was not a gift from some supplier or somebody. There's no like freebies here on this channel. I buy this stuff with my own money, and your donations and Patreon support helps me be able to afford to buy some of this stuff so I can tell you what it sounds like. So you can save money and not buy these things yourself and then get stuck with it. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Until then, have a nice day.